Hello YouTubers, this is my first video review and it's going to be about Rolex, which is my favorite brand in Swiss watches. The watches that we've got here in front of us today are two Rolex Submariners. The Submariner is one of my favorite watches of all time. It is the most, in my opinion, the most iconic watch, the most iconic diving watch ever made. Here we got two of them. Just before we go into them, this one is the, it's about 2 years old. It's a green sub, 116610 LV, and the one over there is a Submariner, no date, 14060, and that is from 1994. Now, to give you a quick overview of the Rolex Submariner before we go into these in more detail, Rolex, the word Rolex, very few people don't know the name Rolex, and the Submariner is one of the most famous models. Now, introduced over 60 years ago, in 1953, it is one of the most famous watches of all time. In my opinion, it has the best looks. It can be worn to go diving, to that important meeting or dinner, or for anything really. It's sporty and elegant. It's got a robust look, and it gives you that sense of being indestructible. Now, the water-resistant oyster case, which does feature the screw-down crown and the self-winding movement, for wristwatches are pure ingredients of the Rolex Submariner that we owe to Rolex founder Hans Wilsdorf. He was a genius businessman, we must say that, and his marketing strategy was even greater than that. His watches have shown up on famous actors and films like James Bond and such, and have boosted the brand's reputation and sales throughout. Although originally designed as a tool watch, it has become a fashion statement and top choice for people all around the world. Now, water-resistant watches were already in the Rolex collection since the early 1930s. I've just taken off this one here. This is a Datejust 2 in stainless steel, white gold bezel and diamond hour markers, all original. And this was basically it is one of the watches that was the cushion, but derived from the cushion from a long time ago, from the cushion-shaped oyster. And the water-resistant watches, as I said, were already coming out in the 1930s. Now, in 1935, Rolex was already selling a cushion-shaped oyster case with the reference, if I'm not mistaken, 2533. However, this cushion-shaped watch did pave the way for a partnership with Panerai. Now, back in those days, Panerai was an Italian Rolex dealer which specialized in diving equipment. They also had a close relationship with the famous Jacques-Yves Cousteau, which led to enough input and engineering to convince the decision makers at Rolex at the time to develop a professional diver's watch. In the first years of the 1950s, there was a lot of experimenting going on with regards to the professional diver's watch. There were lots of companies which were sort of trying to get a piece of the action. Now, the name Submariner wasn't being used at the time, so obviously Rolex took that up and added it to the watch. Now, in September of 1953, Rolex let the world know, obviously in a spectacular way, that they were able to produce a diver's watch. Auguste Piccard dived 3,100 and odd meters into the ocean with his Battlescape deep diving submarine. Affixed to the vessel's hull was Wilsdorf's Rolex, which was especially created for this adventure, featuring a clearly visible Rolex logo and a luminous dial. And when the Babyscape rose out of the water, the Rolex watch was obviously still working properly. Now, achievements like that created a lot of attention and awareness among the public, and also paved way for a new interest. There already was a demand for watches that could take a bit of abuse during sports, but also during everyday wear. Now, visitors of the Basel Fair, nowadays known as Baselworld, in 1954 were happily surprised to see a big display window and with a wristwatch featuring a matte black dial, big luminous hands and indexes, and a rotating bezel with markers. The zero position on the bezel, I'll just change this over here, and we'll get the green one here. So the zero position on the bezel up here was marked with an arrow and luminous pearl in the center, which still is the same up until today. A small sign said Submariner, the diver's friend. In other words, Rolex created a professional diver's watch with an automatic movement with a water resistance up to 100 meters, and this was thanks to the screw-down crown system called twin lock, which later in the years became the triple lock, just like this. Now, just to go over the 14060, the non-date sub. So, introduced in 1990, the 14060 proved to be Rolex's first step to modernize the Submariner. Now, there are obviously earlier models. This is 1994. Some of my favorite watches, which I'd like to get in the future, would be a 1680 and also a 5513. Hopefully I'll be able to get those pieces soon. Now with the 14060, as I said, it was their first time to modernize their Submariner while staying true to their original roots. Now, introducing this watch, they added a Sapphire Crystal, also 300 meters water resistance, and it also has a triple lock crown. It did replace the 5513's 1520 caliber, if I'm not mistaken, to the higher beat 3000 caliber. Now, the no date dial for me is a more clean and symmetrically sort of balanced watch. It does only have two lines down here, which say Submariner 1000 feet 300 meters. It is a non-COC certified Rolex, one of the very few Rolexes which for collectors could also make that little difference. It does have the lightweight hollow bracelet, opposed to the new Submariner's heavier, thick. It is a solid bracelet on the new one, so this has a bit of a sort of flimsy feel, but a vintage feel to it. Also has the bracelet has the diver's extension, right about in there, which you can just obviously put onto your wetsuit by just flipping that open, not needing to adjust the watch. It does have a stainless steel bezel and the aluminium insert. Now, earlier models, this is what I like about the earlier models of the Submariner, is that the luminescence on the dial is, what they use is tritium. On the newer models, it's a superluminova. The tritium is a radioactive element used, and it does give this lovely feel this lovely look to the watch. So we've got the stainless steel bezel and aluminium insert. Also the what is used for the luminescence over here is tritium, which in time loses its luminescence, however gains this beautiful patina, which turns it into like a darker color, and adds character to the watch. Newer models like the 116610 LV, actually any models after 1998 have a different kind of luminescence, usually luminova or superluminova, which is not radioactive, just like the tritium dials, which makes tritium dials make vintage watches more sought after, and gives them this lovely vintage look. Now, naturally, this model has lug holes, as you can see, also adding another like vintage feel to this watch. It is, although it's a model, an older model, it was made in 904L surgical steel, which is tough to scratch and holds a lasting shine. It also takes scratches and dings better. Now, the 5513 and the 1680 might be the golden vintage choice of the lot. However, this feels like a classic vintage, although it's just a 94. But it has newer technology, tougher materials, whilst maintaining that awesome vintage look and feel. Just a simple, classic, tough, and timeless piece. Just moving on to the 116610 LV, which is also known as the anniversary green or the Hulk. It's got an amazing green. You might not be able to see it here under this light. This watch is actually considered by Rolex as the start of the premium line of the Submariner models. A very small supply is produced compared to the amount of black subs, obviously, that are made. Now, this, compared to the older models, has thicker lugs on a thicker looking case than before. It's also got wider crown guards. One of its main features is the ceramic bezel insert, which is, can take any kinds of hits, very hard to scratch or break, and doesn't lose its color, or so they say, because this watch hasn't been out for long enough to actually prove that. What I love about this is the green color changes depending on light conditions. In the sun, on sunny days, these are not scratches, it's just on sunny days it looks different. Gray days, and it's absolutely stunning. This also features a bit of a more modern flip-lock clasp. It's a bit easier to you just need to pull it out like so and move it up or down and just click it back in. Really easy. Obviously made out of 904L stainless steel, is submersible down to 300 meters, 1,000 feet, and also has a new caliber, which is a 31 jewel 3135, and it is COC certified as well. Now, what this watch has, which a lot of new Rolex models have been coming out with now, is the blue paramagnetic hairspring. Now, this hairspring is quite fascinating, actually. Now, being that the balance wheel is the beating heart of your watch, it's regulated by this tiny, delicate hairspring, and it can be affected by magnetic fields. Now, conventional hairsprings are vulnerable to magnetic fields, which can distort your watch's accuracy. Now, 5 years after setting out to find a new alloy which would be unaffected by magnetic fields, Rolex has found the solution with this blue paramagnetic hairspring. That is, I guess, almost the end of my review. I mean, I love all the vintage watches, especially Rolex vintage watches. They do sort of satisfy. I think they satisfy me more than newer models. However, that is tastes. About vintage watches, In my opinion, the best vintage watches to collect would be Rolex, but the thing with vintage is that they have style and character, which really gives them this nice look. Now, if I was to choose next models for my collection, there are quite a few that I would start to go for if I could afford them. But for example, the Day-Date. It was the first watch to show the date and the date. In my opinion, the most important things that you need on a watch. Comes out in precious metals, and precedents around the world have showcased this watch, and I think it's just an awesome early timepiece. The Daytona, obviously undisputed, one of the undisputed kings of the vintage world. You can get one of them early pump pushers or screw down. The Paul Newman naturally is one of my favorite. That lovely dial. If you can get a tropical dial, obviously prices really go up. There are some early explorers like the early explorer. What is that called? The Freccione, which is also known as the Steve McQueen. Also early Milgausses, which have that beautiful lightning hand, the seconds hand, which has now been reintroduced by Rolex in the new Milgauss. Some of my other favorites, the two of my favorites, would be the Submariner, the 5513 and the 1680 with a lovely patina. Or you can get, GMT Master was one of the first. It was a new first for Rolex, a new concept and complication, which would show 2 time zones. There is a lovely version called the root beer version, which Clint Eastwood made famous. You can also get what is called the nipple dial, which is, in my opinion, one of the nicest dials on the GMT Master. But obviously, when looking at vintage watches, it's always good to do your research online first if you don't know much about that particular model, and do buy from reputable dealers. I guess that's my review come to a close there. I will, if people like this review, please do let me know, and I'll post another review on this Datejust 2. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it.